thing. I meme here a lot about these. Maybe you've been here when I've done this, but there it is. It's too big though. We got to shrink it back down. They're too big. These cylinder seals, right? So these cylinder seals, now obviously some of these seals have explicitly on them written in cuneiform like a recipe list, or some of these cylinder seals are literal fucking grocery lists, right? So, but some of them are a little bit stranger. And this is the meme I've gone over and got into here a couple times where I don't know if we know exactly what the fuck they were trying to say. And, you know, you could watch someone like Irving Finkel, who's an expert in this, and they're fairly transparent in what we do and don't know. The problem sometimes is there's people that come up who maybe aren't quite as much of an expert as him, or don't have enough, you know, aren't as transparent or courageous to say what we don't know. And so then they're like, oh, that's obviously the sun. It's like, well, how obvious is that, right? And I don't have a background in any of this. I would just come in and ask questions. I say, oh, okay, it's the sun. I was like, that's weird. They're living on the sun, right? Buddy, come here. Come here. Bud. Dog having a freak out. It's howling. I'd say that looked like, bro, that kind of looks like something other than the sun. And I was like, well, but I'd say, you know, isn't that the sun right there? That's another one. It's like that. So this mustn't be the sun then. If that's the sun, they'd be like, oh, well, that's the star. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, bro, that kind of looks like fucking the sun to me. But all throughout Egypt, you find the wing disc too, right? And it's called a sun disc. It's like, what is my opinion objectively worth in these circles? Not a lot. But at the end of the day, kind of like Sitchin, if you take a shot in the dark sometimes, you hit. And, you know, it's like, that's just how this works, right? Because really, we don't fucking know. I would bet, just logically, considering these gentlemen are living on the object, and they seem to be pretty specific in these depictions, this is not the sun. And so then we have to go back to square one again and be like, what could it be? And I put forward the idea of a comet. So did Sitchin. I think Sitchin hit the nail on the head. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah. You give him 30 minutes before Bourbon Gate. Oh, brother. I wish I had a bottle on my desk, but no, actually, I'm glad that I don't, because then I start drinking it. So, oh, fuck. Yeah. That icon looks very similar to Germany's Eagle, 1940s, current day USA Eagle media. Yes. Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. Well, here's another depiction of it here. And this is, I think I have it up here, actually. It's the Egyptian eagle. Do I have it up here? Bird of prey, hawk. Fuck, I don't actually. But it's kind of reiterated through a lot of different cultures, and its origins are like, even in some of these, you'll see, like for here, I'll show you an interesting one. I've got a couple. I'm looking at a bunch of them on my screen right now. Here's one right here. So this is kind of a cool one. I think I've shown this here before, but this is an actual cylinder seal, and then this is some actual clay that they rolled it in. So I'll blow it up so we can take a close look at it. But that's the actual seals that they look like. They're these tiny little seals. And they're usually carved into precious stones. And we actually don't know how they even carved into some of these stones, because some of the stones are like diorite. Like, they're very hard materials that are, you know, you'd need something like a diamond in some instances to effectively carve into them. And people didn't have that kind of shit back in the day. So how they even carved into some of these cylinder seals is a mystery. Now, this one isn't diorite here. I don't know what this is made out of, but there's a bunch of, like, if lapis lazuli, they get a bunch of very rare minerals that they've used to do this, which is intriguing, but yeah. Even the spaceship came in during an eclipse, looks like moon underneath. Yeah, it's my usual seal, yeah. And so, but this is the interesting one here, right? I'll blow it up so we can see it further. Again, we meme about the giant man. There is a giant man on a horse, again, just for scale here as to like how specific these people were. Like, that guy is fucking colossally huge riding on a horse, right? I think I saw this one in the Louvre. This may be in the Louvre, actually. There's other depictions like this where it's like oddly specific as to how big these people were. Like all the time, constantly. Like, they're like 8 feet tall is effectively like how tall they were depicted even. Because there's some comparative images they show with regular people, and it's about that height if you were to assume the person was about 6 feet tall. So now here, there's a couple things in the image, but the interesting thing in the image is the winged disc again in the sky. And you'll notice that it's got the two little orbs above it, right? Which is really weird. There's another comparison here of this as well. These are very old. Like this is Babylonian, Assyrian, Akkadian cylinder seals that are 4,000 years old, between 5,000 and 3,000 years old. A lot of them. Some of them are like 2,500 years old. Now, don't mind the other object in this image. Where is this at actually? How can I pull this up? Let's do I have it? Oh yeah, okay. Is that it? No. Just a second here. Don't mind some of this other stuff. There you go. Don't mind the image above it actually. But you can see there's another couple depictions of it here as well. And these are from different cultures out of Mesopotamia. But there's the one we just saw on the right with the 2 dots. There's another depiction there. I think that's with Nimrod. I can't remember. And then there's another one up there as well. So what's interesting is you'll see, and I'll try and find another image of this here, which is the eagle, or is it a hawk? Hawk, Egypt, winged. I wonder if it'll pull it up. It's not a depiction of Horus. This here. That's a scarab beetle there, but there's another depiction of it as a hawk as well. But you'll see it has these 2 orbs below it. And you'd have to go deeper into this. There's another culture as well that is similar depiction here. That it had these two other objects below in its claws. Interesting, but you'll see that I think there's a modern depiction as well with the eagle, the American eagle, that it's kind of a similar kind of vibe with it. But I don't know what it means. It's weird, but the original image goes back to Mesopotamia, I think, clearly. I've got another picture of Ra here. I don't know if it has it in its... No, it doesn't. Or does it? Well, it's got the 2 serpents at its side, though, which is interesting. So, I mean... Whatever the connection is here. I had put forward the idea potentially this might be a comet, but that's kind of from Sitchin, actually. Yeah. Yeah. Pleiades again. Yeah. Zoroastrianism uses a symbol. It does. Yes. Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think we just saw that actually somewhere here. But Zoroastrianism is one of the, you can buy it. Okay. One of the religions that cropped up out of the polytheistic traditions in Mesopotamia. But it's actually, I got an image too of him. What's his name? Zora? I forget what his name is. I'm assuming it is. Is it right here? Here it is right here, right? There it is right there. I'll shrink it down so we can see it again. But that's Zoroastrianism there. But, similar, this god within the winged disc, right? Which you can see here. There he is again. There he is again. There's Awanis there, the fish man. There he is again within the winged disc. And, this all goes back to the older symbols, like this one I pulled up here, which is my favorite one. This is the OG. So Zoroastrianism would be what, like 2,000, 2,500-ish years old. This is like 4,000 plus years old. So these are the original depictions of the object, which have this guy up in the cloud, which is, I think it's Anu in some of these, or Marduk, but Anu is like the head of the god pantheon out of the Sumerians, the Anunnaki. So there's a couple different interpretations of the god pantheons, through Mesopotamia, but essentially that's it. But what are they living on, I guess? So the beetle feet, it makes me think of battery connection terminals. Well, there's a Baghdad battery, right, man? So this is in Baghdad. This is in Iraq. So who knows? Although that image we just showed was out of Egypt, but I think it's the meme, and I've gone over this before here with where is it here? The caduceus, right? So that a lot of medical professionals and Hippocrates hijacked, I think as well as Hermes, but the Hippocratic Oath, you'll see medical professionals have the caduceus on their lapel, right? Now, the origin of this, it might be more strange, honestly, in my personal opinion, but at least my bet of it would be more strange. It is the winged disc and the serpentine imagery entwining below it, right? If you look closely here at this cylinder seal, you'll notice in the tail of it, they put like an S. They put kind of like a serpentine tail on it. And then if you go back to Egypt, where we just were a second ago, and you look at Ra seated under the winged disc, you'll notice there's 2 serpents coming off of the head of this thing, which in the caduceus are coiling down it. So what all this means is that all this iconography goes back, I would bet, to an earlier period of time, and we probably really don't understand what this actually fucking meant, right? Because you gotta think. Like the Sumerian civilization goes back 6,000 years. Just a long time. And wherever this all originally came from, if it hypothetically goes back farther, like 12,000, man, that's a lot of telephone game. And the sketchy thing about all of this, which you never hear anybody bring up, but I will, is that even these cultures we're getting this iconography out of may have telephone gamed it themselves. So they may have literally believed this was the sun, when in fact it might originally not have been. And so that's how complicated it could all get, where if you're going back to time periods 12,000 years ago, even the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, they might not even know what this actually meant originally. And then we're really fucked. And that could be the case, actually. I brought this up before too, right? Where if you look really carefully, the cross is everywhere, right? You see it here again on this relief here that has Ra seated on. Ra also with this same red orb with a snake entwined around it over his head, which we could get into. I've gone over it ad nauseum here before. But you see this cross here, right? Entwined within a circle with 4 dots. Mind you, this isn't fucking Egypt. That's the Hopi's flag. The Hopi were famous for working with the ant people and their legends. There is an interpretation. Now, don't take this to the bank, but there is an interpretation of the ant people, ant friends in Hopi, I believe. There's if you were to say it said something like Anunnaki. So the ant friends that brought them into the caves to survive the last cataclysm, they referred to as the ant friends, the Anunnaki. What's that sound like to you? Sounds like the fucking Anunnaki, right? And they just happen to have similar iconography, right? Like there's the winged disc. I'll shrink it down so we can fucking see it. But there's the winged disc is the cross. There's a version of it there. So there is a connection here. But anyway. Yeah, maybe the serpent of snake is the icon for the underground dwellers, brother. Who knows? Yeah. Does anyone know of a good archaeology debunker? Someone like Brian Dunning, Michael McWest, but for the ancient history community. I like hearing the counterpoints, but when it comes to Carlson or Hancock or whatever, it's always just seemed like ad hominem attacks. Yeah, Flint Dibble was one of the popular ones, Tylenol. I think, I would say probably for anybody that wants to hear an interpretation of some of the stuff I've just got up and pulled up here, I would say probably one of the best resources you could start with would be with Mesopotamia with a guy named Irving Finkel. So he's a Sumerologist. He's an English philologist, Assyriologist, Sumerologist. He's an expert in Mesopotamian history. He's a British archaeologist. And famously, he decoded the origin story for the flood with Moses. Or Noah, sorry. Noah's flood. Not the Exodus of Moses, that originated with a gentleman named Untapishtim in Samaria on that little tablet right there. But Irving is a very accredited gentleman who's kind of helped interpret a lot of the history served in the last couple decades. I don't know, Irving, I don't know, I'd love to talk with Irving about some of this stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if he has behind closed doors some edgy opinions on this, but interesting nonetheless, his work, yeah. Point being clearly defines a god ascending or descending from winged chariot. Oh, it does, yeah. I've always get Zoroastrianism or Zoroastrian on those online. Which religion tests are you? Do you actually, brother? Holy fuck, there you go. You're back to Nibiru, brother. Yeah. Looks like a strand of DNA. Yes, that's what Sitchin thought. So Zechariah Sitchin was the Nibiru guy, right? That probably people are maybe loosely familiar with. But he had thought that too, and other people have, like David Icke, other people have looked at this, thought it looks like DNA too, entwining serpents. That iconography is all over Mesopotamia. And so they thought maybe that's what it is now. There's another alternate interpretation that I brought up here before, which is that actually what it could look like and what it might look like is a celestial phenomena, a comet. In that comets, and actually if you look at our own solar system and how like our planets orbit around our sun, it could be a comet, and this could be the tail of the comet, actually. Even Planet 9, what we're currently looking for, has this elongated tail of trash that swirls at the end of it. There's some people in astrophysics actually trying to find it through this tail of trash because they think there should be some kind of a thermal reading that would come off of it. And so it would probably too kind of look like this, right? A big planet on an elongated orbit will probably have wings like a comet, right? All the trash behind its tail kind of look like this, you know? Is that what they were trying to say here? Is that what they were trying to get to? That this is actually Planet 9? I don't know. There's more schizo theories we can get into talking about that, but anyway, yeah. But yeah. Also, all old info at this point, but there was painting found at stone with an accurate depiction of DNA. Was there? Or was it kind of like this media? Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. The old stories of the snake corrupting humans, and the snake is depicted as DNA helix, maybe a hidden warning not to corrupt our DNA, warning from mistakes of the past. Who knows, man? I mean, you know, where are they here? The Anunnaki. Where the fuck are they? It's a straight up fucking schizo gym stream here again. We're fucking right down in the mud. Is that it? No, that's not it. That's another giant post though there, the Anunnaki, right? Again, you know, the lad there with a handbag, but this time he's got a stick on it, which is interesting. There's a guy riding an ostrich or a vulture, sorry. And then there's another regularly sized guy beside him. Interesting. Where was it? One of the creation stories. Is this it? Oh, there's a cross in the circle, maybe. There's a famous cylinder seal that has Inanna who's one of the Sumerian gods, holding a monkey. And there's a sign like a caduceus, I believe, beside it. And people thought that, Sitchin thought that they're playing with the DNA of monkeys, is what someone was trying to tell us. And mind you, with some of these seals, we don't know who made them. So Sitchin would put forward the idea potentially it was the descendants of these beings, these gods themselves, who actually made some of these cylinder seals. And so the knowledge encoded within these supersedes us. It's knowledge directly handed down from the gods themselves. Now, you don't know that with conviction. That's just something that he threw out there. But I mean, you know, at the end of the day, we don't know. So yeah. Caduceus to me signifies our DNA that was editing by the Enki the serpent. Yeah, that's a popular interpretation, Aaron, actually, of people that look through this stuff. Yeah. I mean, my personal bet, I would say, would be that it's a celestial phenomena that's being depicted. But even that's a schizo interpretation, because again, like this thing is, where is it again here? This thing is just the sun, supposedly. I don't think it is. There's every indicator that it's not. But then that obviously opens up another fucking schizo can of worms for them. Because then if it's a comet, like, and there's people living on it, and it's not just that there's just any old people living on it. This is literally where the Anunnaki are from. That is undoubtedly what they're trying to say here. And so then you're off to the races. A lot of weird shit with the old goddess and Mithras too, if you want a tangent to go down sometime. Born to Virgin Mom on December 25th. Oh, interesting, man. Okay. I'm not super familiar with it. Yeah, I'd be interested to dig into that. Where is it, at a Mesopotamia egg, or is it somewhere else? Yeah. They just spotted something that might be kind of schizo on one of these cylinder seals. Yeah. One second here. No, I'm good. It looks like a way parting water, whatever the craft is, maybe the myth of splitting the ocean from Moses. Who knows? I mean, this stuff would have been, Moses would have been around 3,400 years ago. I guess the Exodus, it's between 3,400 and maybe a little bit older, potentially. That's another meme I've gone over here before too, which I want to bore people with some of the stuff, because I know some people are like, fuck, Jim, not again. People sitting in here like, probably Digi fucking has heard this, if Digi doesn't have me on mute like 30,000 fucking times here. But I was working on something. I don't know if I call it a dissertation or anything, but I mean, I was doing research into Manny Velikovsky's source material. Yeah. And there's an interesting tidbit that came out of it, and it has to do with this god here, Ra. And it also has to do with the Exodus, and it has to do potentially with this object seated above him here. That there is a guy named Pliny. I'll just quickly go over this again. 5 minutes for people that don't want to tear their fucking ears out and eyeballs. Pliny the Elder. Okay, this is what Velikovsky had found in ancient history. So let's see if we can find this here. Typhon Comet. This is the connection that this might be more than just a schizo interpretation. There might actually be something to this. Here's the quote here. It's from Pliny's Natural History. A terrible comet was seen by the people of Ethiopia and Egypt, which Typhon, the king of that period, named after himself. The comet had a fiery appearance, was twisted like a coil, and was very grim to behold. It was not really a star so much as what might be called a ball of fire. Now, Pliny does not explicitly mention in this excerpt when this happened, but sometime in the ancient past. There are no known kings named Typhon in the Egyptian dynasty, but there is a time in Egyptian history when the dynastic Egyptians' lines were interrupted, and it happened roughly 3,600 years ago when the Hyksos, the northern people in Egypt, invaded and kicked them out. For about 100 years, there was an interruption, and we don't really know who was reigning there when that happened. And so, sorry to blow on the mic. So, possibly this gentleman was Typhon. Now, the interesting thing about this is that in the actual story of the Exodus, there's a moment during the Exodus when Moses and Israelites go up to the Pharaoh and want to leave, and he lets them go. He says, this is after all the plagues. He said, you can go, leave, like, get the fuck out of here. But just know that evil's on the horizon. So that's the official interpretation. Now, evil in Hebrew is spelled as Ra, R-A'. Now, the original meaning of this word, this is like some kind of scholarly, it is a bit of scholarly woo, but I don't know, well, it isn't really. There's an interpretation from these Midraic rabbis back a long time ago that the word Ra didn't just mean evil originally, but the word Ra actually was supposed to mean evil red star. Now you'll see what we have in this picture. We have the god Ra with a red orb over his fucking head with a serpent coiled around it. Right? And so in the original reading of the Exodus, the Pharaoh would say to Moses, he said, you may go. And this was actually the edited, possibly the original reading of the story. But he said to Moses, you may go. But I think it was they said something like, my astrologers have told me of this evil red star on the horizon, and it is known to cause bloodshed and killing. That is the actual line that supposedly was originally supposed to be in the Exodus. That's one interpretation of it. So, you then have the god Ra in Egypt with a red star with a serpent coiled around it over his head. Okay, where are we all going with this? Where we're going with is that this object appeared in the sky during the Exodus. It was possibly the cause of the cataclysm that Moses and the Israelites and the Egyptians sustained. That this star appeared and caused a cataclysm. And it was misinterpreted over time and telephone gamed that the gods sent these plagues down and these disruptions, but it ultimately ended in a cataclysm. You get the parting of the Red Sea, etc. But this was all to do with some kind of a cataclysm. So again, you look carefully, the god Ra has a red orb with a serpent coiled around his fucking head. It was supposedly named after this Typhon, which supposedly, maybe we could say, make this argument, existed during during the Hyksos invasion. It could have been one of these invaders who was the king at that time that we lost. And now this happened 3,600 years ago, right? So again, there you red orb over Ra's head, winged disc, which I argued before is a comet. Pliny says this terrible comet was seen. It had a fiery appearance. It was red. It was twisted like a coil, very grim to behold. This is some of that shit, you know? Now, the other interesting part, which probably isn't like fun to connect because I don't know if it's true or not, is the time period. This argument, this is ultimately, what I'm going over here is ultimately this guy's. I'm just fucking, it'll correct it. There you go. Manny Velikovsky. It's this guy's argument. He thought during the Exodus there was a cataclysm. He thought during the Exodus a great comet appeared in the sky. There are other breadcrumbs I'm not threading together this right now because it gets too complicated. But there are other anecdotes of this. And this is actually going a bit farther in this particular thread than he went, where I'm taking it. Now the year is interesting because people, 25 minutes later, let's be quick. The people, Sitchin, who we just went over a second ago, right? Zechariah Sitchin had his planet Nibiru on a 3,600 year orbit, right? So this object, well, above Ra, it's the same object as Sitchin. This object here is on, according to Sitchin, a 3,600 year orbit. He found that because in the Sumerian kings list in the British Museum, the antediluvian, or the kings that ruled before the flood, had rain periods measured in 3,600, which is a Sumerian Sar or Shar, which is it's a special number to them. It's like a holy number to them, 3,600. So Sitchin thought this number must be important for a reason. He thought it was the orbit of this planet. So if you wanted to if we wanted to do a Gaia TV special here, right? And freak everybody the fuck out, right? You'd say, well, okay. Well, let's just say maybe Sitchin's right. Maybe this object has a 3,600 year orbit. And then we're going to try and argue that the Exodus actually happened 3,600 years ago and there was a cataclysm and this object appeared. What does that mean? It means that we're due for this to come around again. Any day now, right? That's what it would mean, right? Now, there's a problem with the idea that this planet is a 3,600 year orbit, if it exists. But anyway, you can see some of the memery that can go on here. But anyway, there's a legitimate argument that there maybe was an encounter, or there was a comet in the past, or some kind of a sighting of an object in the past the ancient peoples had, and that it's been echoed through time and telephone gamed into something that we misattributed to the sun and all this other fucking shit. But ultimately, at its root, potentially, there's something to the idea that there was some kind of a cataclysm, some kind of a comet people saw. Now, is the comet a planet? Is it on a 3,600 orbit? And do the Anunnaki live on it? I don't fucking know. That's where you'd just be, yeah. That's where it's like, people will call you schizo. It's like, yeah, okay, fair enough. But this is where, if someone wants to do a Guy TV special, here you go. There you go. No one's done anything on that. No one's talked about this at all. No one's gone into this really in depth of any quality depth since he fucking died. He was good friends with Einstein. Him and Einstein worked together on, I think it was Earth in Upheaval, and I think Einstein ended up writing a foreword for either Earth in Upheaval or Worlds in Collision at some point. So, he had some well-to-do friends as well. Yeah. Sorry for the comments. So, a weird fusion of Roman, Persian, and Indian beliefs. Strongest competitor of Christianity for a long time. Isn't that actually interesting, man? Yeah. I'll say a prayer bones. Isn't there a new planet in our solar system with a red dwarf sun that's in its inhabitable zone? What does Alex Jones taking aliens or ancient civilizations? That man has been right so much. The Planet 9 is what we're currently looking for, media. Yeah. Planet 9 is a search for a comet-like planet in our solar system. Yeah. Now, it's not at an orbit like Sitchin proposed, and they don't think it causes periodic catastrophes, although they don't really know that. But yeah, it's essentially it. Yeah. An earthquake would explain the parting of the Red Seas. Yeah. Yeah. It could be it, man. Yeah. There's also a big eruption of the Santorini around that time, would have fucked up the weather, maybe tsunamis, etc. in the Mediterranean. Yes, Egg. Yeah, about 1628 BC, there was an eruption of the volcano there. Yeah. I had a whole thing, I still have a whole thing written up about this. I went deep into the carbon dating and the dendrochronology. The dendrochronologists ended up figuring out the date of that eruption by piecing together different fucking twigs and pieces of trees. And they came to the year 1628 BC. And that is when it happened. And it's interesting because around that time, there's variance in some of the datings, obviously. And not everybody agrees on it, but there was some kind of a movement of the people from the north in Egypt, the Hyksos, down to the south. And it could have coincided with these cataclysms, but some people will argue it happened 100 years before. Some people argue 100 years after. The variance, you probably know this, Egg, but the variance in some of these dates in the dating that you get in geology or dendrochronology, they've got like a plus or minus 100 sometimes. What the fuck's that mean? It's like a plus or minus 100 years. You're like, if you're trying to be specific and narrow something down, plus or minus 100 years is fucking terrible because, essentially you're within 100 years or so. So it's nobody knows specifically with any complete conviction when any of this fucking shit actually happened in the past. There are people that still doubt that the Exodus even fucking happened. I mean, I would say that unlike the story of Jesus, it's fairly well cemented, so anyway, but when they think it's 3,400 years, this is a suggestion of 3,600. I'm not trying to correlate that to Sitchin's orbit or anything. Neither was Velikovsky. So it's just kind of a coincidence. But anyway, anyone that's interested in any of this shit finds this stuff compelling, read his book. It's actually very well written and it's very easy to read and it's very great to go back to because of how it's arranged, where you can kind of pick through different parts. You can come back to different parts, reread them. I love Worlds in Collision. It's woo in like physics circles probably because astrophysicists hate it because of his proposal as to what this comet was. He thought it was Venus, that it escaped the orbit of Jupiter and flew by us and went into its current orbit. And like, we know that didn't happen, but what's even more schizo is that this other planet in our solar system rips through the inner solar system. And that would be very unfortunate if that turned out to be true, because then there'd be a lot of things we thought were real or thought we knew that we didn't. And it'd be contradictory. And so we just don't really talk about that. Anyway, yeah. Cardi to the Ancient Keys, brother. Fuck. This is one of those memes though, right? I wasn't going to bring this up, but I mean, and what I don't like doing, I do this for entertainment for myself usually, right? And I'm not like trying to, I know full well this is not something you should necessarily do. But like you go to things like remote viewing and you corroborate some of this stuff with remote viewing. Now, you're not going to put that into your paper, let's just say, right? Unless there's some crazy corroboration and they hit something on the head. So like if they do like a Joe McMoneagle remote viewing and they like find a Russian sub in the location that he found it, it's like, holy fuck. Like there's nothing quite to that degree though. But there was some remote viewing I was reading over recently from Jim Mars, who actually we brought up because DigiU had linked this. So I went deeper into looking into his book. And in his book, The Alien Agenda, which I think I have, where's my fucking bookmarks at? No, Jesus Christ. Bookmarks, show bookmarks, show all bookmarks. Here it is right here. This is it here. He did some remote viewing back, or he got some remote viewers to remote view. You know what's interesting? So this is obviously like schizo fucking episode at this point, right? We've gone to like something that's fairly grounded, and now we're like going off into La La Land slightly. But Jim Mars was a writer. He was a researcher in ufology and conspiracy theories and whatnot. And back in the mid-1990s, there were a group of remote viewers that were doing sessions trying to understand if the government had ever had any interactions with visitors in the past. And one of these anecdotes from this was, I got to put a fucking comma in here, I guess, to find this, because it's that fucking obnoxious. Of this planet that shows up and a cataclysm that happens. So I'll read through a little bit of this here. Now, what was he line? There's one part in specific I'm trying to think of here when they mention this. Here's a bit here. So let's just read through this little snippet, I guess. Now, which part do I want to take here? Let's start. Here we go. Well, this is kind of interesting. There's two saucer shape. Okay. Here we go. So let's read through this. So this is essentially some aliens land. What the remote viewed was one of these encounters that government officials had with visitors. So there was some kind of a rumored encounter. It wasn't a Grady Treaty. They looked at this, and supposedly the viewers blind got that there was some kind of a meeting that took place. I feel the heat of the sun. There is some sort of airstrip, like an airport around here, close by, I can tell. This is a viewer through their session. I'm hearing the sound of aircraft like jet planes. There's some sort of restricted area, though. I see some guard or observation towers. There's a convoy of cars, dark cars, coming down this blacktop road where I was. No, wait a minute. This is a base, a military base, an Air Force base. People get out of the car and go inside this building. They all dressed in suits, dark suits. Now this is interesting. There are three saucer-shaped craft approaching. One of them lands while the other two stay up. Another lands and the third lands, and the third lands. The first landed opens up. One of the black cars and a couple of jeeps go out to it. Three grays appear and descend from the craft. They are not walking. They are floating to the ground. The door of the car opens and this tall older man steps out, then a couple of military guys and another civilian type. This is a hot place. The temperature is desert-like. Two of these grays are small. One is tall, but not as tall as the older human. Something funny about this guy. Wait a sec, holy shit, it's one of our past presidents. The viewer later acknowledged it was Eisenhower, so this is a Grady Treaty. This viewer said the group got in a big black Cadillac that took them to a nearby building. They are scooted in quickly by some people in blue and white helmets. Big guys. The president and his party and the Greys go into a conference room, it looks like. Just a minute, I'm seeing this whole thing to be pre-planned. This was supposed to happen. Both sides feel anticipation, but the feeling tone is low-key, almost muted. The Greys are interested in opening and maintaining communication. The civilian type asks how this can be done. The tall Grey responds that they will provide them with the means to communicate with them locally and at a distance. This tall one asks that they, the humans, not fear them. The president asks, why are they here? And the tall one replies that they are here in anticipation of future changes and that they will help accelerate the rate of development. Not for war purposes, says one of the little ones. They want an understanding with them, says the tall Grey, but not an alliance. The president wants to know how long they have been around. The short one replies a long time. He says longer than your recorded history. He says we were abandoned by our forefathers, our makers. The civilian type is visibly upset, like he's about to have a heart attack. The three Greys turn to look at the sky. Wow, he calmed down almost immediately. They like the president. They feel he is steady. They don't like the civilian type with him. No, actually, they feel sorry for him. The president says he wants a friendship and cooperation with the aliens, and the tall Grey says they want the same. This is written in this way because this is transcribed from the actual book. This is all the transcription that you can copy and paste. He also says he will continue to observe and wait to see what we do, how we act towards them. But he says he will continue to be here. The civilian type wants to know what changes are coming. One of the small Greys say they will tell us more when it is the right time. Soon, he says. The tall Grey turns toward me now. He knows I'm here. One of the military guys kind of wakes up and wants to know what's wrong. Nothing, says the tall Grey. Just that we have a visitor. How can that possibly be, asks the military guy. It is not yet time to explain, says the small one. This viewer says his remote viewing session ended abruptly after this incident, as his thoughts were being blocked, as though there were still things to talk about in private without eavesdroppers around like me. So in the actual remote viewing of that session, these beings recognized he was there and they pushed him out. In the woo of remote viewing, this is something that happens. So, yeah. That's the de-dunking guy, right? Oh, I've got that up here too, did you actually? Planet X in the solar system is still only half as destructive as the first 100 days of the newest administration yet. Fucking Christ. It does sound like the Eisenhower incident, yeah. This is supposedly it. So this is, again, Jim Marrs is a author, a researcher, and this is a session I think he may have tasked. He worked with a think tank that had remote viewers, I believe. Either he did or this is a group he knows of that did. And this is a session they got back around this first meeting that we have with these beings, which is fucking out there, obviously. Another viewer added details to the idea of coming changes when he remote viewed a meeting between yet another American president and Greys sometime in the future from where we started, the mid-1950s. Can you tell me when this happened? And I'll venture to say a little before the year 2000, reported the viewer. There are 4 Greys here, 2 tall ones and 2 short ones. Besides the 2 men in dark suits, there are others around in military suits and regular suits. So this is where things get fucking interesting in the next 2 paragraphs here. I don't see a ship or anything like that, just some chairs. Mind you, this isn't the theme of Jim's book. This is just an isolated incident of this in his book. which they look like they are made out of grayish gum-like substance, which sounds like bubbles are. When you sit down on it, it molds around you and holds you very well, but it doesn't constrain your movements. The Greys are sitting on them, one to each of them. So they are talking. The Greys are telling about the orbit of something. They say it's an anomaly, but it's something that was done to preserve life. Go over that in a second. It required a lot of energy, the tall one looks like a praying mantis says. He says they and others are going to do everything to help avoid catastrophe on the surface. He's speaking of models. He says the way it looks now is that they will have to wait until the values can be entered when this thing gets near, because the gravitation of this thing is so disruptive that every time it comes, it affects everything else differently each time. He's also telling the guys in suits that they are staying out of the squabble. He's not specifying what this is. He's also recommending that they think the guys in suits are out of it. One of the tall ones, I think, says they will have to defend ourselves if any of the other parties involved try to enter secured zones. It is necessary, he says, to protect our own development. They say they'll honor our human laws and treaties. Another viewer envisioned a meeting between aliens and human leaders in which coming geophysical changes are discussed. The changes, saying the tall, skinny gray, are going to affect the planet. He says it'll be 25,000 revolutions around the sun. The Earth is pelted by large stones from the sky. He must be talking about meteors or asteroids. There is also a planet that crosses the orbits of planets in this solar system, and that this Gray says cause a lot of problems for Earth and other planets. This thing's apparently big, or at least bigger than the Earth. He just produced like a hologram of the orbit that this thing cutting across the plane of the orbits of the planets in our solar system. That's neat. He's showing the guys in suits that this planet is going to be close to the Earth as it begins to accelerate in its own orbit going out of the solar system. This hologram also shows them that there are asteroids from the asteroid belt that get dislodged from their orbits and decay. Some get pulled in by the Earth and miss it barely, others hit it head on. He tells them to get people involved in putting up the best one can come up with, a shield, because he's talking about protection. He tells the Haunches that there is not much they can do now, meaning at this time. The guy in suits questions how many will die. What can they do to plan for this event? That sort of thing. The tall, skinny Gray speaks to them again. He says they must build underground facilities for themselves and their people, not just where they are, but in other places where there are mountains and bedrock. What about the rest of the people? Asks the guys in suits. The Gray replies that there are humans who will still, humans who will die because they are not prepared. He says that the job of the guys in suits is to prepare for the people for this event and tell them how to prepare themselves. Panic, he says, is inevitable, but there are means of keeping problems to a minimum, and we'll give you those means. Whoever transcribed this didn't do it. I read this in the actual book too, so this isn't quite read it quite properly. But this viewer wanted to describe how humans in orange jumpsuits left with the Greys after a ceremony of departure. I just went over this recently. It's very interesting shit. So, pretty interesting. Thank you, Poker Stars. Yeah. So this is again just about this whole Planet X meme. Now, I mean, people, remote viewers, anyone that knows any remote viewers who have worked with people in remote viewing, a lot of them have gotten stuff like this in the past. Now, what does it mean? The interesting part about this is from a group of remote viewers. I would ask Jim Mars, but he's dead. So I don't know where the fuck he actually got this from. There may be some people who know where this came from. I don't know. But it's interesting. There's a couple things they described here, or the remote viewer described, which is the planet cuts across the planet. It cuts across the ecliptic plane. So our solar system, so Planet 9 and the real search for Planet X back in the 80s and 90s, our solar system's inclined to the galactic plane by about 30 degrees. So we're like up like this, right? So this planet and a lot of objects out kind of in the farther reaches of our solar system aren't inclined like our solar system. So they're not on an angle. So when they come into the solar system, they end up crossing the ecliptic plane. That's why Sitchin called this planet of his Nibiru, because in Sumerian, Nibiru means the crossing or cross, right? And what's interesting, again, when we go over this kind of stuff and you see this iconography of this winged disc, is you notice that it's depicted as a cross, right? So it's an interesting meme, right? Where you're like, why did they choose to depict it or abbreviate it? Why did they choose to abbreviate this winged object with a cross? Well, this is the reason. Because it crosses the ecliptic plane. It was known as the crossing object. So, anyway, fun shit. Yeah. Flight Image 370, brother. Interesting. Yeah. So I just thought I'd bring this up. I just was reading through this over the weekend because Digi had shared there was another schizo post somebody did about a comet that's going to kill us. And he had mentioned an anecdote out of this book that Jim Marrs sent of this remote viewing. What's interesting for me out of this, obviously this is supposedly a conversation between visitors and the elite in the West, and the visitors told them about this. And the other interesting thing from the conversation, aside from them mentioning the crossing of the ecliptic, which is Planet X, Planet 9, Nibiru, etc., was the mention that it has an anomalous orbit. They say it's an anomaly. It's something that was done to preserve life. If it had an orbit of 3,600 years, it would be an unbelievable anomaly. It would be far too extreme for an object of its size. And I've been told this by somebody who's an astrophysicist and also a philosopher, who I was talking with and I had a couple conversations with via email a couple years ago. Because he's looking for Planet 9. And he's the dude that's looking for its tail, right? Because he had this whole hypothesis around, well, it would have a long, elongated tail that's spiraling behind it. And I was like, brother, I've heard someone who's brought this up before. And anyway, so he did the math on it for me. And he broke down why 3,600 years for an object of this proposed size would be unbelievably unstable. It's just interesting. The aliens said they say it's an anomaly. The orbit's an anomaly, but it was done to preserve life. It required a lot of energy, which is implying that they did this. And I was like, oh my fucking God, like, where are we going down this schizo rat? I'm not even going to get into how deep this goes, but it gets like way the fuck out there. Right. So like the aliens fucked around with it to preserve life on the planet. So there's life on the fucking planet. And they mentioned about our creators abandon us. I mean, this is the Anunnaki creation myth. I mean, is this just some elaborate schizo thread together by Jim or the people doing this remote viewing? I don't fucking know. And this is kind of like, this is obviously, it's not double dipped. What am I trying to say here? It's like secondhand shit too. You'd have to actually go talk to the viewers themselves. You'd have to know who they are. You'd have to know that they're not fucking, imbeciles or they're just making shit up for money. Like, before you take this to any kind of a bank, and mind you, no bank's going to cash in remote viewing to begin with. Any bank, any academia, anywhere is going to cash in any of this. Doesn't mean it's not true, just because of unreliable and, subject to interpretation it can be. But anyway, if this thing does show up, the aliens did it. There you go. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, yeah. They're U.S. drones and ghost satellite footage. I also recommend you doing search. Oh, this is the MH370 meme. Yeah. I think we're all about the debunk on that here, guys. Yeah. Remote viewing, so pinch of salt stuff. It is, Aaron. Yeah. This is just we're going off on that fucking tangent. You can buy Jim Marrs' book. It's called The Alien Agenda. If anybody wants to read further into this, or you can just go to Internet Archive and read it, which is what I'll do. But anyway, and Jim's I actually loved Jim's posts on Above Top Secret years ago. I used to love his content. He would post them regularly. He was a great content creator. So I never read his work though. But there you go. So let's hope nothing happens with this. That's my fucking hope. But anyway, yeah. But yeah, anyway, we'll move on to the video maybe of Randall, because that's going to be more interesting, but just a side note. So anyway, yeah.